Hello, welcome to the first call of September 19th for the Filecoin Plus Notary Governance meeting. Let's take a look. On the agenda, we have three big points for today. First, with notary issues, we'll walk through upcoming events, kind of give you a feel of what's to come so you can sign up, mark your calendars, and look out for talks or attend live. And we'll talk about some of the past events so you can kind of get a feel of what was discussed recently at the Phil Dev Summits. And we have KZ on the line to kind of give us a summary since he was live and in attendance and tell you what you could do to find the links and watch those contents. As far as working group updates, we have none on this call. So we've dedicated a lot of time for the two open proposals, 974 and 976. What we have set up for these is three parts to each issue. One is just a brief summary of what that issue is again by Phil and Simon. Then we have the most recent threads that have taken place in GitHub to kind of catch you up and familiarize with like some of the discussion taking place. And then ample time in both issues to kind of get your comments and discussions for some of the key issues that were coming out of this to make sure that your voice is heard and that goes into the proposals. At the end of the call, we have lots of time set up for discussion. So if there's any points that you'd like to see added to this call or discuss, there'll be plenty of time for that on the call. So today is the 19th. Next call will be taking place on the 3rd of October. And as a friendly reminder, if you follow the calendar, linked in this slide deck, you can go ahead and grab that. This slide deck is also available in the GitHub comments as well as the Slack issue. So if you want to follow along or get any of that slides, that's where you can find it. And if there's any points that you want to see in future calls, every call afterwards, I'll make an issue in the GitHub repository for Filecoin Governance. Leave a comment. Hey, I'd love to discuss X, Y, and Z, and we'll be sure to build it into the agenda and make sure that that point is included. If you need anything at all, you have a friendly governance team to back you up. If you're not sure where to route an issue, you can always ping me, and I'll be happy to route you to the best POC or make sure that it's bubbled up and heard and discussed and get you an answer for what you're looking for. So with that, notaries, big hello. Let's take a look. Here is the SLA. I'm going to drop this here in chat for everybody. And again, thank you for signing in. I say it always, and I'll just say it again here. Makes it really helpful to kind of get your input as far as where your time is going, kind of measure participation for who's in the program, who's contributing. So notaries on the call, thank you so much. If you're not a notary, still encourage you if you're watching or here live to fill this out. It's a good way to just kind of mark your participation as well as like community inputs. Really helpful for things like elections and kind of measuring it. So thank you everybody for filling that out. The link's posted in chat or you can find it in the slide deck. All right, so we just had two big events that took place in Phil Soul. And so I'd like to invite KZ, who is there live, to kind of give us a summary of some of the takeaways that came from the discussion and Juan talk. So KZ, I see on the line, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, K-Ray. Hello, everyone. So actually, I was at the Phil Dev Summit in Singapore this past week, and it was the first part of two Dev Summit sessions. So there was the Singapore 3-day session, and then starting next week, there's a 3-day session in Iceland. So the idea was in the first sessions there were specific tracks that were covered on each day. So there was focuses on SPs in terms of tooling, business development, really helping any SPs in attendance, working with network growth there. There was protocol development track. There's a lot of discussions about the protocol itself. There was a specific track about FEM, ways to start using FEM more. And there was also a governance track related to our team. Galen and I were there. We covered some topics in terms of KYC, KYB. Galen talked about the Phil Plus process overall, and Juan was actually there to give some talks about, Filecoin Plus, the importance of Filecoin Plus, block rewards going to deals. And so it was really good. All of the videos are recorded. There's a link on this slide here. So Juan gave sort of an introductory talk, almost reintroducing the idea behind Filecoin, the mission, the importance of Filecoin Plus, and the rest. That talk is linked for now. The rest of the talks, I believe, will be updated in the near future. But I think the idea was coming into Singapore and heading into Iceland to start discussions and work on some of the protocol and changes needed, and then continue those discussions next week. So there will be a separate series of talks. I think a lot of it's focused on retrievals. There'll be continued talks about Fill Plus allocators, this idea of having different pathways to DataCap. So right now we all are familiar with the large LDN pathway, eFill Plus. Well, Juan was proposing, anyone with other ideas for pathways, we're happy to have you bring those to the table, design something, build it out, and receive a small amount of DataCap to test it. So they really want to continue those discussions. I think that should be hopefully an exciting part of the topics there. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, K. Ray. It was overall productive. A lot of the same faces from other events for sure. And it's good to see people and collaborate in person.
Well, KZ, thank you so much for that summary. I'll pause to see if anybody on the line who might have been in attendance or wasn't able to attend has any questions, thoughts, or comments. All right. Well, if anything comes up, we have plenty of time at the end. And as KZ mentioned,
sorry, I have a quick question, Kevin. Which is, I know that I think one of the proposers of the FIP to sunset DataCap spoke a little bit about the challenges. Do you know if that was recorded too? I think it was. Is it Steve?
Which session are you referring to, Danny? There wasn't anything specific.
I don't know. I was there briefly, and I saw. I sort of wasn't able to make it, and I really wanted to see it. So, but I'll find out. I don't want to slow.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. I would just say I know. Again, Juan really focused on this idea of why, what Filecoin is, the mission, why it'll continue to stay a pathway for any data, all data that's out there. And he really dove into that. So I would definitely watch his session. And he had a really good one on the third day. He came into the Fill Plus governance track and gave a talk more about, abuse, finding ways to mitigate people that are trying to manipulate the system. And I think those discussions will continue in Iceland.
Thanks for that, Danny. Maybe that's a good segue into upcoming events. So as KZ just mentioned, the next event is next week. It's taking place in Iceland from the 25th through the 27th. There's the link here that has the full agenda of the talks, the speakers, and the content that's going to be uploaded. These sessions won't be broadcast live, but they will be recorded and posted to YouTube. So on the next governance call, I'll make sure to share those links as well as put them in the public Phil Slack. So anybody who can't make the trip to beautiful Iceland, you'll be able to watch all the content talks and kind of digest what's being discussed around the ecosystem and community for that. And then coming up in November is a big event. It's the Filecoin Network Base. It's the lab week taking place in Istanbul. So friendly update if you want to mark your calendars and make a trip out to Turkey. That's taking place from the 14th through the 16th. And then before that, in October, is the Phil Vegas. So this is organized by the Filecoin Foundation. And it kind of covers a high level of like the developer summits, very similar to what's taking place in Iceland and Singapore, but really deep diving into like storage provider content and really what's going on in that community to get involved. So the links are here in the slide deck if you're keen to see what the talks are, whether to attend live or be on the lookout for when those are posted. All right, so diving into the two issues that we have, the first is 974. So Simon, if you're on the call, I'll unmute and give you the floor. Thank you.
Thanks, K-Ray. Hi, everyone. Just to give a quick recap, this proposal stemmed off of the Notary Governance call discussion we had on August 22nd, 2023, and iterated off of proposal 967. This proposal basically states three main topics on DataCap removal. The first one being that after 28 days of no activity, meaning no comments, the application will close and the data cap that was allocated to that application will be removed. Second, if a client requests to self-close or to remove data cap, for example, a mistake, the bot will remove the data cap as well. Lastly, would be clients only posting comments to keep their application active and not using data cap after an additional 4 weeks. So 8 weeks in total would have the data cap removed as well. Carrie, can we go to the next slide, please? So the proposal has been out for about like a little bit over 2 weeks, I believe. There's been a lot of community members providing input, so thank you very much for that. I saw one from D-Store providing options with different timelines on the right side of the slide, and saw a lot of comments with choosing specific options, but without any reasonings. So please provide those reasonings. We're going to close this proposal either end of this week or early next week. Again, so please provide your input with reasonings. I saw some good comments raising some concerns about how some onboarding projects can take a lot longer than expected. So that leads us to the next slide. Maybe we can start with the second discussion bullet, which is what is the preferred timeline then? If 28 days is either too short or too long, I'd love to get some feedback from the people who started this discussion, the people who raised the concerns on the actual proposal itself, whether it's 6 months, 3 months, 2 months, I don't know. We can make it a little bit like a time-bounded experiment. Try it out for about 4 weeks. We can see the results, iterate from there. But curious on what people's thoughts are here.
Simon, hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, man. Good. So I've been reading through the proposal. It was a proposal I also made in the same month as you did it. The thing I'm worried about, and I'm worried about everything on the proposal side, is that a lot of the abusive accounts comment. And there's a multitude of them. There's way more bad ones than good ones, unfortunately. And they keep voicing their disapproval of proper ideas without any real comments or arguments. So I'm quite annoyed. If you read through your proposal, it seems like 70% is against and 30% is in favor. But I believe the real scale is completely different than that. So how do you manage that expectation?
Yeah, I agree. And thanks for flagging that. I do agree with you. There's a lot of comments, and I think that's why we're pushing for more comments from people to provide reasonings. I know with the options that was provided by D-Store, people were just trying to choose C without providing any input. In my opinion, I think the weight of the comments are a little bit more based on some good reasonings that we've been seeing, some especially in notaries as well. That's how we've been trying to take into account, but open to other suggestions as well.
Yeah, well, my honest opinion for this is 28 days is more than enough. If people only comment, adding 4 weeks is more than enough. And if we stop in 90% of abusive applicants who try to game the system with this, and only 10% of real applicants are slightly harmed by needing to reopen a new one, I think it's completely worth it. I shouldn't stop this proposal because maybe 1 or 2 applicants are in a different boat where they need an additional 4 or 8 weeks. I think we should see good implementations, and a few odd cases where this is not in their favor. I think we should just separate them and accept that if you want to fix the whole, sometimes you have a few good people on the wrong side as well.
Yeah, good point. I think, something like you said, maybe we can start with this. And if there's always ways we can go around this and make discussions if clients actually provide good inputs and status updates on why it might take longer, let's say, than for 28 days. We can just like take it from there. But thanks today. Danny, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna initially underline what Hide said and then what you said, which is yeah, there are a lot of new GitHub accounts. I don't think it's surprising if we have a system that gets abused, that people abusing it will advocate for it to be kept the way it is. There's no, despite the appearances, there's no reason why it's not a vote. I could see people saying, oh, we need to call a vote. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, the couple of things I have, which is like, we can move this up and down if we really do feel that there's some legitimate people getting caught in it. Initially, we can change and respond to that. And also, I think that it's worth considering that when people really do complain like this, it's a positive signal. Like if a lot of these new GitHub accounts are kind of going, oh, choose option C, then we should probably choose option B.
Yeah, good input. I guess that would segue to and my next comment would be to, if people on this call I saw them actually commenting on the proposal. If you could provide your input on as to why you would want to extend the 28 days to make it more. I know there were some people who commented that the onboarding projects could take a lot longer just because of unforeseeable like problems that come up, which totally makes sense, but curious as to and want to hear from others on this. I don't want to call out their names, but if you could please provide your input, that'd be great.
Nice. And then Simon, one question I've seen is talking about the first step to remove.
Yeah. So thank you, Kerry. That is the next discussion point, which is maybe starting with this proposal, we can remove DataCap from the applications that the client either approved, self-closed, or deleted the application itself. Our reasoning behind this is that it kind of shows the client has lost interest in the onboarding project itself, as if they were to say that they would like the application to be closed, or if they delete the application itself, the bot would remove DataCap from that wallet. Any questions on these two discussion points?
Simon, I think a question folks may have, just guessing, is how long will this issue remain open before it kind of moves into the next phase?
Yeah, so sorry, I say that before, but either the end of this week or I would say early next week. So before we all head out to Iceland, I would say.
Wonderful. Well, Danny, thanks for the question on that. Simon, thanks for the overview. If anybody on the call wants to kind of comment again on the timelines for this or what's the kickoff, please make your voices heard in the issue. And it sounds like it will be end of week before this kind of moves forward. So we have a few more days, and I'll post this video tonight so everyone has a chance. Simon, thank you so much. Phil, if you're on the call here, can I turn it over to you, Phil, for an update on the AC bot? Essentially the same summary.
Yeah, sure. So the AC bot was we announced this last governance call. AC stands for aggregation and compliance. The point of this bot is to aggregate all the different data sources we have, all the stuff we have currently, retrieval bot, CID checker, all the checks that we do, basic checks that we do on your client application. And then in the future, there will be other checks such as data from the SP working group, and then also data from maybe Filecoin Green. We can compile this data and then use that to enforce compliance. What does that mean? So let's say if your retrieval score is below a certain amount, we could remove your DataCap / CID checker below a certain amount, remove your DataCap. If and then another case is if you're not using enough SPs or your data is not as distributed, or we see CID abuse. So all of these are different thresholds for metrics we can put to kind of increase the standards of our clients in our network. All these metrics are meant to increase distribution as well as integrity in the system overall. So by being more retrieval, it shows that you're actually storing data that can be retrieved. By not having CID abuse, that means that you're not sharing CID between multiple clients, which is fishy. And so all these things will lead to a better, more transparent ecosystem. That's why we believe that this is necessary. We also think that it's going to be more neutral and more less bureaucracy, more objective. Now we don't have to rely on notaries to have the DataCap removal process. It will just be automatic. Now, since we're removing DataCap, the rules that have to be set and the thresholds and the parameters that have to be set have to be very well set, or we don't want to remove DataCap from good actors. We just want to remove them from the people who fail basic requirements. So ever since, so that's a recap of what the aggregation and compliance bot is. Ever since this announcement in the last 2 weeks in the last governance call, we did do analysis on all the open clients, all the clients with open GitHub applications. We looked at, let's say, retrieval. We looked at how many people have their data being retrieval, and how many people, at what percentage of their data is retrieval. And then we graphed them out from worst to best. And based on that, we could think of a threshold. And then also how many people would get hit by this threshold if we were to implement this threshold. So coming up soon would be another proposal following this up. And that would have more finalized parameters. And those parameters, I think, would be supported by data. And I think that's going to be the way we implement it. And we can discuss that in that proposal. Yeah.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you be able to do random CID downloads and paste the findings inside the actual LDN? So the notaries who do not have the skill sets to try an actual retrieval can see the files, and then they can comment on if that specific file, that random CID, is actually the data that the client says it's storing. I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to do an automatic random once or twice a month retrieval on a certain LDN to showcase that it's actually the data that the client says it's storing. And it makes the work for notaries much easier.
So are you saying that you're going to retrieve the data, actually do a full retrieval of the data?
Just one file. I mean, Wynand is doing this, like Crypto Wizard is doing this manually for 6 months now, every week on 1,000 applications. But the bot should be able to do this. And by doing it, it can show the rest of the notaries the files, the random CIDs, and they can open it. and they can see what's inside. I mean, just retrieval is fine, but that can be spoofed in a million ways. So my suggestion would be random CAD downloads, the full package, and linking them to the LDN application, and then everybody can see it. And if someone says it's storing cat pictures, and we actually see CCTV footage of a garage, you know what time it is. So that's like that's an idea I want to see implemented.
Yeah. Of course, like this, like the framework of this, the AC bot is flexible. It's more about collecting different data sources and then using that to actually acting on it. So then, like in an automatic process. So I think, Hide, your idea of like doing a full retrieval and then putting the CID on the on the actual application for notaries to check. That could be one piece of data, right? And I think like it's not really automatic enforcement because there isn't a way for the bot to like kind of look at the CID and then say that is this cat videos or not, right?
No, but that's the reason why we have notaries. It's the do not trust the client, do not trust the miner, but verify the data. And yes, that is work for notaries, but it's an easy check. If everything is by the bot, that's a few minutes per LDN per notary. So that shouldn't be too much of work.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's I don't doubt it's a great idea. I do think though it's kind of like outside of this proposal because this proposal is kind of like what are the things you can automate DataCap removal. That one still requires notaries in the loop, right? So yeah, we could also work on another proposal for that if need be, because like we could also that could be automated to show CIDs on the GitHub application, but it won't be like automatically removed. Rather, it's just to like show evidence on the GitHub application. Yeah, I don't mind writing another proposal for that if you want to provide.
Yeah, I can help. I'm back in 5 minutes. Sorry.
Cool. Anyone else have thoughts or comments?
Well, maybe this would be a good time to open it up. In this discussion, there were some comments that KZ left that were pretty insightful. Since we have him on the line, KZ, can you kind of share a little bit about the TLDR that you posted and the link we have to the other discussion here?
Sure thing. So as part of building out the requirements for this AC bot with Phil, I was doing a separate analysis looking at every single LDN application since June and any sort of trends in terms of SPs as they were being added to an application. Were clients using the SPs? Were the SPs distributed? All those types of things to see if guidelines were being met, because a lot of that, there is no bot currently checking any of that, right? But what we found is, we can hold clients accountable to state SPs, entities, locations, and then actually make deals with those SPs. Because what's happening on a majority, they list some SPs and then they make deals with other SP minor IDs. Things change. I know that might not be exactly how you planned it initially, but we were able to come up with some clear requirements that will make clients make sure they have the SPs that are going to be following the rules, making retrievables available. And if not, the applications won't even be accepted, essentially. So I think this was a lot of good work to help Phil build out the bot towards this specific component of SP distribution.
Thank you for that. Danny, I saw that you had a hand up. Did you have a question or comment on that?
Yeah, this is an observation less about the bot, which sounds great, and more about kind of the social reaction to the bot, which is one of the things I've noticed with a couple of the basically partners of FFDW, which is the 501c3 that's the sister organization to the Filecoin Foundation. It's a non-profit. So one of the things it does is encourage other public good producing orgs to store data on Filecoin. And so I've been shepherding some of those. And one of the challenges is, for instance, they're applying for DataCap so that they can go to SPs and say, hey, look, we have DataCap. Please store our data cheaply. But there's a chicken and egg thing there where people are obviously going, well, which SPs are you going to store it as? I don't think this bot changes any of that. I think it's just a note that all of this stuff is kind of advisory. So as was said, if the SPs do change, I think if there can be good reasons for that. There can be reasons why the compliance bot highlights something, but it's perfectly innocent. And I just want to, like Hide, say that like the notary has to make the decision in the end.
Yeah, so for that, Danny, we do have kind of like a grace period. The bot can make a say, but the way we do it is kind of if you fail a check, we will warn you 5 days before, and if you fail the check 5 days in a row, if you don't have a good reply or a good reason why you're failing the check, then we'll remove your DataCap. Right? Yeah. So it's kind of like I wanted this to be like a way to just kind of remove DataCap from the people that fail the very basic requirements. So obviously the parameters would be really, really lenient. It's hard to just have, because we thought about this, and initially we wanted the bot to just give recommendations to the notaries, but we felt like it won't cause enough of an impact because people will just wait on the notaries and there won't be anything that results in the end. So that's a reason why.
Good points. Lastly, Phil, there were 2 outstanding questions. I was hoping to turn this over to you to kind of facilitate as far as what would be most helpful to kind of glean from the community on these 2 discussion points.
Yeah, so first, I guess I'm guessing these are discussion points provided. I think these are aggregated from comments in the application itself. So firstly, it's how the overall design of the bot. It may be somewhat controversial because it's the first time we're creating an automated way. Well, other than Simon's bot that removes DataCap from closed applications, it's kind of creating an automated way for us to judge an application and then use metrics to actually remove DataCap, bypassing notaries. So we need to figure out proper parameters, and I just want to make sure that the community is okay with this. If there are any one against it, you should put it in the application. If there's anyone against automatic removal of DataCap, you should let me know here or in the application.
And then Phil, similar question to 974. This is currently in discussion. How long will this issue remain in discussion before it moves on?
Yeah, so I think this would last quite a while because it's a pretty big one. What I would do instead is I would create a follow-up discussion, talking about the exact technicalities of this and the finalized parameters. That would be a more important one because then clients can actually see if they fail some of these checks, right, on that application. on that proposal, clients can see if they fail the thresholds. And if that's the case, they can argue why the threshold is not good, like maybe relax the threshold in certain ways, so on. So it won't move on. Instead, there will be a sequel proposal, if that makes sense.
Nice. Thanks for that rundown, Phil, KZ. Appreciate it. We'll kind of move into open topics. So if there's anybody on the line that has anything that you want to discuss, this is open forum. Floor is yours.
I wanted to ask one more thing. How many of you will be in Iceland next week? Because Wynand and I are joining from Sunday till Wednesday, and KZ will be there, and who else?
I'll also be there.
Now I'm thinking about
If
going.
we're talking Iceland, I will also be there.
I'm gonna be in Iceland too.
It's going to be a summit of developers. We will develop.
I will also be at the Blue Lake Lagoon in the spa in the hot springs for a while.
Like, how long will you be there? For like a year or?
No, I will be there Monday morning because Wynand is taking the first meeting. As you hear, I have a baby in the back, so I will be on mute again.
Hey, folks. I just have a quick question on eFill. I saw the Banyan Computer application. My understanding of eFill was that clients had to do KYC and KYB. Is that not the case? Or is any platform that can facilitate data onboarding now allowed to get DataCap?
I can answer that. At least start the discussion. I replied in the comment that currently for eFill, you can, as an applicant, you can go through KYC. It's not necessarily the client because a lot of times either SPs or other parties apply on behalf of the client. And then the business
applying on behalf of the client, there's no client information there. It just says we have clients, or we potentially will have clients. So if that's the case, we're going to carbon copy the application, submit for 15 PIBs, and I imagine many others will as well, because there will be no retrieval requirement, and ultimately anybody can claim that they're an onboarding platform and get DataCap.
Yeah, understood. And so the KYB requirement as well would be enforced for the business. And then it's up to the notaries. Up until this point, there hasn't been any of these use cases that have actually been approved. So I think this is something, and maybe this can come up next week in Iceland, or we can set up further calls to sort of think about, pathways and on-ramps for ISVs specifically, for the case where we won't know the data, we won't know much about the clients. If there's a lot of clients involved, it's more about the applicant saying, "Hey, I'm storing a copy of data for 100 of my clients. This is the data that's being stored. So can we trust that applicant or not?"
Yeah. So this is where
this point, I don't. Yeah. Go ahead, Galen.
This is where what we really want to see is those service providers applying as quote unquote notaries themselves in the next round. This is something that probably like a year and a half ago with Estuary, we were working with them as well, kind of testing out as a proof of concept, should they be their own kind of large data set notary? Should they just be a client address? How do we track the flow of DataCap to their downstream clients? Like, there were all these kind of implementation questions. Fundamentally, in my mind, I think that projects like that, where it is a data onboarder, a data preparer of some capacity, it would be great for them to function as notaries themselves. And they would say, here is how we will do diligence on our clients. Here is the type of clients we're going to work with. This is the type of data we're going to work with. And then the onus would be on that data preparer to say, we set out a plan for how we would perform diligence, how we would do the bookkeeping, how we would hand out DataCap, what our allocation strategy would be. And then the community could look at that application and say, this, let's try it for, 15 PIBs and see how they award that 15 PIBs to their clients. How quickly does it land on chain? How many clients? How many SPs does it work with? Are they meeting their bookkeeping and allocation strategy that they proposed? And so then it's letting, in this example, Banyan, but others, Estuary. Last week when I was in Singapore, I met with a group called Lighthouse. They're making a desktop client for end users to, drag and drop files that would then be onboarded to Filecoin. Could they be their own notary where that Lighthouse team has their own amount of DataCap and they're handling sort of that back-end allocation to their specific clients? But then the community could come and say, hey, we know that this address is the Banyan notary address, and it's worked with these 100 clients. And those 100 clients all turned around with, only one SPID. That doesn't meet their allocation strategy or whatever. And then we could say, hey, Banyan, you're not, meeting your allocation strategy. You need to change, or we're going to, revoke your notary status. So in this way, what we're really kind of hoping to move towards is those programmatic notaries where Banyan, or like I said, Lighthouse or any other group could propose and say, here's how we will perform diligence. Here's how we will choose clients. Here's how we will answer the question, is this a real client with real data engaging in real distributed onboarding? And those are sort of the questions that we care about.
Danny, forgive me I know you have your hand up here, but just want to have a couple follow-ups on them. So, isn't that by definition self-dealing, first and foremost? And two,
it depends on if they are. So if they're a service provider and a client and a notary and a storage provider, that would be self-dealing.
Well,
but if they're a service provider,
yeah,
right. So if they're a service provider where they're going out and doing biz dev and finding real clients, they're providing a service to those clients. Their onus is on them to do the diligence on those clients. How do they know the clients aren't bots or malicious actors or engaging in illegal data? So in that way, that is another client. And then the onus would be on this notary, Banyan, to say, what storage providers are you going to work with? How do you know your storage providers are distributed and performing, good data onboarding and meeting the SLAs that you and your clients want? So in that way, they are this intermediary, but they are not the owner operators of, they're not the ones making the data. They're the ones preparing it.
It could be. They could claim to be a data operator. They could make data and then push it.
Well, and in any of these realities, like, people could be, behaving in bad faith, right? And so that's where, what questions can we ask qualitatively up front about how they would do this?
Data.
Yeah, that's one way. And then downstream, quantitatively, we could do public retrieval. There are other things we could do where if they say we're going to use a third-party KYC service, we could say, great, make those KYC records available on demand as part of a requirement of their bookkeeping strategy. So what I would love is for us to say, okay, if someone like Banyan is going to apply to be a notary, what questions do we, the existing governance and notary community, need to ask of their application so that upfront, qualitatively, we think they're gathering the right information, and then downstream, quantitatively, we could verify it. So maybe it's not full retrieval by a bot, but maybe it's, we need to be able to do random retrieval testing or spot retrieval sampling. maybe that's a thing that needs to be baked in. Should
But
that
I thought
be
the whole point of
programmatic?
Plus was that it was going to be encrypted data. So that's confusing. I'll add another thing here, which is, so are we saying that the end user has to be KYC'd or not? Because from what
We're
I
not
hear,
saying that.
you're saying, as I read the application, there is no client KYC, but now you're saying they're going to be notaries, so there is KYC. So is there or is there not KYC?
KYC is not a requirement. KYC is something that we are testing in different pathways. KYC is a way for us to use a service to gain some amount of information about a client and reduce some types of civil attacks. KYC is not a blanket requirement for all of the pathways, and KYC does not have to be a requirement for, a different aggregator notary if they apply and they say, here is how we will perform diligence, and they say we're not going to use a third-party KYC service. That, then the question is, okay, well then how do we know that you are using separate clients? How do you perform diligence if you don't do KYC? So it isn't a requirement, it's just a type of information that we can gain the front. And then as far as you're talking about like eFill, yes, the original intent of eFill was for encrypted data. So what I'm saying is that right now, Banyan is applying through an existing pathway. What I would like is to channel that energy into a more appropriate pathway of them being their own kind of allocator, their own notary format.
Yeah, I mean,
we're talking about like two similar but separate things.
It sounds like a wide open door for folks to abuse DataCap, but that's just me, and we'll obviously track the application. We're going to carbon copy it and do the same thing. I imagine that many others will as well.
Sure. And so then the question for all of those people, the questions from the community will be, how are you performing diligence? How are you doing bookkeeping? And then when questioned, how can you present quantitative evidence to demonstrate that you knew that it was a real client with real data engaged in real distributed onboarding? It could be encrypted, it could not. It could be retrievable, it could not. But what are the different ways that we can check, using existing tools like the CID checker bot, new tools that we need to develop, like various randomized retrieval sampling? Is that something that we need to invest in a tool in? Because that would work as a catch-all for lots of these types of aggregators. I don't know. And so that's where we want to say, what are the different pathways we could test that these other teams want to build? Because the thing is, like, the governance team, we don't have the bandwidth or the resources to build a service that Banyan is building, right? So we want to empower them to build that service, but we want to say, what are the checks and balances? And one of those checks and balances is also the amount of DataCap. 15 PIBs of DataCap across 6 months, a year. Is that the biggest threat risk compared to not trying this pathway and continuing with the ones that are existing? In my opinion, 15 PIBs is a really good test size. And if 5 different teams around the world propose 5 different types of onboarding partnerships or pathways, and they each get 15 PIBs, and we test them, that's not to say that we're going to wait until they run out of 15 PIBs to check on it, but that's just to say that in the grand scope of the 11, 12 exabytes of storage capacity, 15 PIBs is not the biggest threat vector. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be mindful about these. It's just, again, kind of putting into perspective, what are other ways we can mitigate risk? And one of them is the volume of DataCap that these notaries would be given.
Yep. I don't know how you fairly stop after 5 teams, how you don't end up.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that becomes a great question to ask is, what is the different value prop, right? If someone comes and they say, I'm doing the exact same thing, we say, well, who are you working with that's different? Or show us your UI that's different. Or what else are you building and contributing, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be that every one of these teams has to be fully unique. But if they are functionally doing the same thing, but working with different SPs. Well, that is a different, unique value prop, right? Like if Banyan says, here's our list of SP partnerships, and we have exclusive agreements with them, and here's where they're located, and here's the KYB that we did on those SP partnerships, and here's the list of minor IDs. And again, I'm not saying this is what Banyan is doing. I'm saying this is a way for us to push back on these, to understand how they're going to function, and then to hold them accountable. So then if another one shows up and says, well, we're going to do the exact same thing, and we say, okay, who are you going to work with? What SPs are you going to partnership with? And if it's a different set, well, that's adding a lot of value to the network, because now two different pools of SPs are gaining from this type of onboarding pathway, right? And then let's see, well, in 3 months, which one is successful? In 6 months, which one is successful? Are they both equally successful, or has one outpaced? That could be really interesting. Do you see what I mean? So and this is where I want this to be generative and kind of, what are the blind spots? What can we test? Let's bias towards trying something with checks and balances. So one of the checks is just the volume of DataCap, but that's not sufficient. So what are the other questions we need to ask of Banyan to hold them accountable at the front? And again, of anyone who submits an application like this in the coming notary election cycle.
So I think the important thing here, right, is that the criteria that Fill Plus kind of requires is not KYC. It's not even so much self-dealing in the sense of like no SP can be involved in any other part of the process. It's, are these deals with real customers at the end, as opposed to throwing dev random and getting the multiplier as a result of storing that data. I advocated very, very quietly a year or so ago to have like a separate route for intermediaries, like S3, like Web3 storage, like Telnex, right? And I think I would add a certain thing to here, which is that we have a huge amount of flexibility in how we construct this. And I think sometimes we get kind of locked into what is the, we think is the existing pipeline now. So we talk right now a lot about the characteristics of LDNs. And LDNs have a large fraud profile and like a lot of data, because you get a lot of data cap in one go. We have all these other routes, right? Like the GitHub route. We should have more. So, and we have a huge amount of flexibility. We could mess around with a multiplier. We could mess around with all kinds of processes. Just off the top of my head, you know, a thing
what do you mean
that
mess around with a multiplier, Danny?
We could create a new program that only had a 5 times multiplier, right? If we were worried about people really switching into that, we could propose a FIP and say,
that's a protocol change.
Yeah. So, but that's
yeah,
we.
But
we're the
is
community,
mutable.
right? You know. So anyway, the point here is that one of the bits of feedback I've had in sort of trying to see with clients whether they want to go through the LDN process for large data or working with Web3 storage or something like that, is Web3 storage, because they have a bunch of data cap, have to do it all through their wallet, right? Or their address. So maybe there's a streamlined system that we create for intermediaries where and I think this fits what you're describing, Galen, right? Where the intermediary is allocating data cap on a per wallet basis, so you can have individual actors be the holders of their own wallet and the whole data cap. But that also gives some external oversight, right? Because you begin to see the patterns of that kind of thing. So I just wanted to say, like, we can do any number of programs, and I really think we should. It's kind of early days yet on how we structure this program.
Nice. Well, we have 2 minutes left. RG, I see that you posted a few different updates in the chat. Just for anybody who's watching on YouTube, RG, can you quickly summarize a little bit about the talks in Iceland and the work that's been done?
Of course, yeah. So I think there's on-chain ways to earn trust. There'll be two talks talking about some of the designs for that. One of that is understanding risk. And then the team from Elementus.io will be presenting that. And then I'll be presenting a framework to earn on-chain trust. So yeah, that's basically the summary. And then we did discuss this in the last TNT working group call. So there is a Miro as well as a recording posted in the TNT working group channel if you would like to check that out.
Thank you for that, RG. Well, thank you everyone who joined the call. David, thank you for those questions and points. Appreciate you fleshing that out with the team and everybody on the community.
Can I add one thing real quick?
Yeah,
to the chat? Sorry, I know we're kind of running over it. There was a question in there about like staking. I just wanted to like touch on this. I think that staking, similar to KYC, is a possible way. It's just another pathway for the like people in the community to demonstrate alignment. A client could be required to stake an amount of money. A notary could be required to stake. An SP could be required to stake. And the rules of how that stake is held or when it is slashed or how it could be split and distributed, all of those are implementation details that we could figure out. And they don't have to be one size fits all. I think that sometimes we get mired in this idea of, well, if we make this rule, it must apply to everything. The rule could be for this type of client, instead of KYC, will require staking. And that staking will be held for X amount of time. I mean, someone could say, we're going to do staking. It needs to match the
Did we lose Galen?
I think we lost Galen.
in and out of service. All right, sorry. Staking is just another thing that we could use. That's it. I'm done. Sorry.
All right. Well, Galen, thank you for that comment on staking. Everyone, thank you for your time to join this call. The second call will be taking place at 0100 UTC coming up. Appreciate everyone for joining. You guys have a great night, great week. We'll see you on the next call and in Slack. Cheers, everyone. Well, hello. Welcome all to the second Notary Governance call of September 19th. On the agenda, the call is broken into three parts. Part number one, we're going to talk about the recent events that took place in Singapore and Seoul, point you to links, summarize the talks. Then we're going to show you what talks are upcoming. The conferences in September, October, November. The two proposals on the agenda today are carry forwards, which means we spoke on these on the last governance call. This is a second opportunity for discussion or input, and we'll go through those two topics. There should be lots of time at the end of the call for any open issues that may be on your radar. So with that, this is the September 19th call. If you're watching, if you're joining, the next call is October 3rd. Linked in the slides is the actual invite where you can link this to your calendar. For those of you that are on the call, the slides are in chat, and they're also in Slack if you want to grab those. If you have any points on the agenda going forward, feel free to post that in GitHub. Anything you leave as a comment, I'll reach out to you and see if there's anything you want to add or discuss. This is a great way for you to bring topics, anything you want to see come up on future agendas. If you need help, this is the Friendly Governance team. If you're not sure who to ping, you can always reach out to me, Kevin at FFUSA. I'm also on Slack, and I can help route you to who you need to go to. So let's take a look at the Notary SLA. So I'm going to post a link here in chat, make it a little bit easier for all of you to get. Thank you so much for taking the time, as I always say. So I'm just going to put this right here. And as always, you don't have to be a notary to sign in. If you are a member of the community, storage provider, curious to get involved, this is a great way to kind of show that you've been involved going forward. All right, recent events. So we had two big events that happened in the last couple of weeks. The first one was Phil Seoul, and the second one took place last week, and that was this Phil Dev Summit that you see. If you're keen to watch the talks, some of them are on YouTube. and the majority of them should be online later this week, early next. If you're curious what those talks are, I'm going to load up the screen that shows exactly what those talks took place. This way you can kind of get a sense of like what's coming up at some of the next conferences. So these are the Phil Dev Summits. These are going to happen coming up next week. It's taking place in Iceland. If you were going, and we'll just do a quick hands on that later, if you come to this site, this phildev.io, I'll post this here in chat for everyone as well. This will give you a list of all the talks that happened in the past, as well as that are upcoming. So if you take a look at what took place in the last session, this was the Phil Dev Summit, that took place in Singapore. So all of these talks will have the speaker, what the topics were, and really the main focus of what Phil Singapore was like discussion number one on issues to help developers and devs as they participate in the ecosystem and help rapidly scale for them. So a lot of talks in here. If there's anything that you wanted to see, again, the link is in chat and you can go through it. The next set of events coming up is going to be taking place in Iceland next week. And this is the second Phil Dev Summit that builds off the Singapore that happened last week. This came up in the morning call where folks were curious who else from the community was going. So if you're on the call right now and you're going to Iceland, can you please like raise a hand? And that way we can just kind of get a quick sense of who might be there, who's on the call. So if you're going to Iceland, just raise a hand either on live video or in the chat. Yeah, Iceland is quite a journey. I'm also not going to be there as well. So if you wanted to see what talks were taking place for Iceland, same thing here on this page. If you click Iceland, after each one of these talks, they'll record the videos. I'll be sure to put this in the Slack so you can see them, as well as put on the next governance call. But essentially what's taking place in Iceland is kind of a building block of, again, what took place in Singapore. And then lastly, we talked about Phil Vegas, that's organized by Filecoin Foundation, and Istanbul taking place in November. So coming up, we have the DataCap removal bot. This was issue 974, and this has had a lot of comments. So this is the next 3 slides. Before I kind of go into this, let me kind of summarize what this issue is. So essentially, what 974 is looking at is once DataCap has been granted, how do we get it back? So right now, there are 3 parts of this. Part number 1, that you see the 28 days, which means after an issue has been open for a period of time, had no comments, how long does it take for that data cap to be removed? The second is if a notary or a client wants to come back later and say there was an error, how does that process for removal work on the technical side? And the third is applications that only had a comment and they were never used after a certain period of time. So 3 very clear, distinct use cases for data cap removal. And that's what this is. So in the chat of this issue, a lot of discussion has taken place. So on the call this morning, Simon flagged that if you look here, some proposals were raised. Hey, we'd like to see it at 2 weeks open and 2 weeks additional after closing. And then you'll see options like, hey, the data cap should always be available once it's issued. Or D, there's unrestricted. And a lot of people left comments like, hey, C or D. What Simon is asking for so they can scope this properly is that if you pick C, if you pick D, if you pick A, list a reason why. Like, I think it should be D because there might be an issue with issuing or coming forward, whatever it may be. Facilitate that into the conversation, because if it's just a letter, it's very difficult to weigh in what should kind of be built into this. Then there were 2 specific questions that he's looking to gather from notaries, from storage providers, from people in the ecosystem and community. The first one is, how should this process happen? Should this be an automatic? Should this be pinged? Should this go out? So if you have any thoughts on that. But the main question really is what's the timeline? Can essentially that data cap, should it be removed if not used in 28 days? Is that 28 days an unreasonable number? Should it be longer? So these are the topics that they're looking to get input for, and this is where we'll turn it open. So if anybody has any thoughts or comments, this would be a great time to share it. All right, we'll just keep it in the issue then. And then the next one coming up was the aggregator and compliance bot. So essentially what this aggregation will be doing is if we look at that removal, is there a way to remove humans from the process, reduce bureaucracy, just make it standard? And if we make it standard for removing bad actors or erroneous data that might get put into it, how does that process look into issues and how does it take it into account? So that's what this AC bot is doing. So you'll take a look, and they're really taking comments on this middle part, is what are the thresholds that it should run? And so what this is really doing is right now we have tools like the retrieval bot or the CID checker. As we need new tools, what should they be? What should we be considering? What should be taken into account? So that's what this issue is really diving into. It's that how do you measure that like level that should be automated to remove the humans from this process and really put it forward as we're going to go. So if you have thoughts, they're really kind of looking at this learnings that would take place. And one of the key things that came up in like, how do we make this bot automatic is over the summertime, KZ, RG, some of the teams, they went through and they looked at a large chunk of LDN applications. And they would see, okay, what kind of trends are we seeing from misallocated data? What can we see from like the CID checker or the retrieval bot? And so based off those learnings, that's what factored into this aggregation bot issue. And that's where we're looking for your input, if you have any, on how this thing should be structured. So if you have any thoughts on like what should go in to automated data removal, what is the design feature? Or what are the thresholds? Like if a CID cannot be checked, if the data can't be retrievable, what are the standards for storage? If you have thoughts, that's what this issue is looking for. So please share them and on the call. So if anybody has thoughts right now, this would be a great time to voice them and speak up. Well, this might be one of the fastest calls than ever. I'm going to open it up. If anybody on the line has any thoughts on the issues that we have kind of discussed for your review, any of the events, floor is yours.
I just want to say that there was quite a bit of talk on these in the previous meeting, so folks might want to tune into that.
It's a great point, Danny. Thank you. All right. Well, this will be super quick. I'll kill the call. If there's anything that comes up, please let us know. I'm going to post this to YouTube with the translations as quickly as possible. So you'll see this on YouTube with the closed caption translations probably in a few hours of going forward. So if anything comes up after reviewing that translation, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you all so much for coming. You guys have a great night. Cheers, everyone.